Hello everyone. Today we are going to turn this bicycle into a unicycle. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Scott Flathouse. Several years ago I made this image as a joke for a friend, and recently I reposted it on my Instagram account for his birthday. The image got a huge response, and someone made a comment about it looking like it was made with AI or artificial intelligence. There was no AI involved in this image, just old-fashioned Photoshop. Today, we are going to convert this image to a unicycle, and I will be using the latest version of Photoshop, which does incorporate some AI features. We'll be taking advantage of those features, but most of the heavy lifting will be done with traditional Photoshop techniques. Thanks for joining. Let's get started. This is going to be a rather involved edit, and it'll take some time, but I'll break it down into steps. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a clean background to work from. And so what I'm going to do initially is duplicate this layer. And to do that, it will be Command J. So we'll create a copy of the current layer, and we'll name this, let's call it background. And then what we're going to do is make just a really rough selection of our triathlete here. This photo was from the Ironman World Championship in Kona, Hawaii last year. And I'm just doing this really rough. I'm using the lasso tool. I could probably do it a little quicker if I changed it to the freeform lasso tool. I also want to make sure I remove his shadow or fill in his shadow, so we're going to add that. We're going to add that to the selection. Okay, and then this part of the shadow right here. That's already selected. Okay. Now, traditionally what I would do is the content aware fill. And in fact, let's go ahead and do that and see what it does. Okay. So pretty quick, and it's not bad. So you can see here in the preview pane, and a lot of this is going to get covered up when we put the writer back in, but I'm not really crazy about it. So I'm going to hit cancel, and instead I'm going to use, on the selection, we'll use the generative fill feature. So this is Adobe's AI. And it's going to use artificial intelligence to detect the parts of the photo around that it's replacing, and it will fill in. So here it's done a really nice job. It created a new tuft of grass. The shadow is completely removed, and I don't really like that new grass that it added. So let's check some of the other ones. Ooh, I like that. That one is good. We'll check the third one. It looks about the same. Really similar. Actually, I like that one. Okay, we'll use this. All right, so now we have a nice clean palette to work from. And then we'll go on to the next step. So the next step is going to be putting the rider back in. And so I'll turn this off momentarily. And let's go ahead and group those two layers together. And we'll call that group the background group. Now we're going to select our triathlete. And the way I'm going to do that is with this, I'm going to press W for the selection tool. And we're going to go up here to where it says select subject, and I'm going to select cloud. Now this requires an internet connection, and it takes a little bit longer, but it gives us a better selection. All right, so it looks pretty good. There's a few parts of the selection we'll have to go back and fill in, and we might have to adjust it some once we have it all selected. I'm just checking all the edges here. It doesn't have to be perfect, and it still has some problems around with some of the details, but all we really want to do is get it close. So we'll take a look at it again once we have it selected. And we can always go in here to modify it and select and mask. So areas where yeah, I don't like that. Let's fix this later. We'll just go with this selection. And we're going to cut him out. And the way we're going to do that is, now that we have him selected, we're on the layer, the original layer, we're going to go Command C. And then I'm going to create a new layer and hit Command V. Okay. And so since we didn't move anything, it's kind of hard to see what we've done. But let's turn our background back on. So you can see that it kept parts of the image from the original background. I can see it missed parts of the bike. We're going to have to go and pick that back up. But I'm not too worried about the wheels. It didn't do a great selection, but we're going to cut out a lot of these wheels anyway, because it's going to be a unicycle, so it won't need the front fork or the rear wheel. So I'm not going to worry too much about that, but I do need to go get this piece of the bike that's missing. So let's go do that. So I'm going to go down here to the original layer, and I'm just again going to make a rough selection where I think the bike should be. Missing part of the pedal here. Whoops, missed a small piece. And we'll copy it and then go back up here and paste. Okay. And we'll look to see what else, if anything else is missing. Another thing we can do is we can just add a solid color layer here, and maybe we'll turn it like red or something, so you can quickly see if anything's missing. Yeah, it looks like maybe do a little bit of work with the saddle here. Okay, there we go. And let's merge all these layers together. And we'll go ahead and put it into a group, and let's call the group the triathlete. Okay, let's move on to the next step. Okay, so the next thing we're going to work on is creating the wheel for the unicycle. So in order to do this, we're going to use the front wheel. So let's make a selection of the front wheel. We're going to use the marquee tool, the elliptical marquee tool. And I'm going to click here about the center of the wheel. And while I'm holding down the mouse button, I'm going to press the Option key. And this will keep it at the center. And then I'm also going to press down the Shift key, and that will keep it as a perfect circle. Then while I'm holding down the Shift key, the Option key on a Mac, and then the left mouse button, I'm also going to use the space bar, press the space bar, and then I can move the wheel, the selection around, just so that I get the wheel captured. And in this case, the wheel is almost a perfect circle, so we're going to try to make the best selection we can of this wheel. So I'm just working it around here. And I think that looks pretty good. Okay. And let's copy that and create a new layer. And we'll paste the wheel on it. Okay, so there we have our wheel. So we're going to do a few things here. We need to remove this this brake pad here, and then the fork. And we're going to add a little bit of motion to the wheel as well. So we're going to add some radial blur. And to do all that, I'm going to mask out the center of the wheel. So again, we're going to go to the elliptical marquee tool. And let me zoom in here. And same thing. So the trick here is click and start the selection. Press down on the Option, which will center the selection. The Shift will keep it as a perfect circle. And then if you need to make an adjustment on the position, then press down the space bar and we can change the position by dragging the mouse. All right, so that looks pretty good. And I'm going to create a mask, but I want this to be an inverted mask. So I'm going to hold down the Option key and then click on the mask, and that masks out the inside of the wheel. So all this looks pretty good, except for this fork and the brake pad. So let's go over and we'll select these. And let's use the generative fill to see if we can replace those pieces with the wheel. And let's help it out. We'll type in fill with wheel. The other way to do this is just to use the clone stamp, and none of these are going to work. Okay. Let's leave this blank. Okay, not too bad. Let's help it out some more. Okay. Now what I can do is we can erase this part, or so let's take the pen tool. I'm just going to make a selection around the wheel. Or I'll just mask it out. Let's mask it out here. Oops, let's go to the layer mask. There, whoa, okay. Still had this other layer underneath. And we'll do the same thing to this part right here. Oh, let's make this a selection. There we go. Okay, so we'll deselect that. And now we have a wheel. And let's create a new layer and we'll stamp visible this one. And we're going to go back, we're going to draw in, and we can get rid of these generative layers. And let's go ahead, just for organization's sake, we'll group all these together before we get too far into this. And we'll call this the wheel. Okay, now we need to add the spokes back in. and I'm simply going to draw them in so that when we add the motion blur, then we'll of course have spokes. And so the way we're going to do that is we'll go to the brush tool and we'll create a new layer. And what I've done here is I've taken that mask where we masked out the inside, and I've just adjusted the density of the mask so that we can kind of see where the spokes are, because I just want to trace over the existing spokes. Okay, so we're going to go on a new layer. Let's name this spokes. Whoa, what's going on there? Spokes. And we'll go to the brush tool. And I've got hardness at 100%. And the brush width should be about the width of the spoke, which is, in this case, maybe 5 or 6 pixels. Let's go 5 pixels. And I'm going to click on one end of the spoke, hold the shift key, click on the other, and it just draws the spoke in. And we'll do that for each one of these spokes. And some of these you kind of have to guess where the spoke is terminating. In this case, where it's blocked by the fork, I'm just going to guess. And then there's one spoke that's hidden behind the fork that we're going to have to completely guess where that spoke is. But that shouldn't be too hard. Let's get done with all the rest of them. And then it's going to be about halfway in between, and maybe right about there. Okay. Now we have spokes. Let's go ahead and change that mask back to 100%. And let's combine all these. So we're going to stamp visible and call this wheel wheel with spokes. And I'm going to convert this to a smart object. And the reason we do that is so that we can, when we add the blur, if we need to add more or less blur, we can go back and do that. All right. So to add the blur, we'll go to Filter, Blur, Radial Blur. Oh, before we do that, I need to center the center of the wheel here in the center of the canvas. Because the way the radial blur works, you have to select the center, and there's no way to preview that. So we're going to force this, the center of the canvas to be the center of the wheel. And so we're going to go to the crop tool, and we've got to make sure that this delete crop pixels is not selected, and also the fill is just under the default, the transparent. And then the other thing that's helpful is that the grid lines are going to be diagonal, and I'll show you why here. So, and let's make this a square, so 1 to 1. So we want to take the center and put it in the center of the wheel. about like that. And we're not going to leave it cropped like this, but we'll go back to the original cropping. Okay. Now we can do filter, blur, radial blur. And we're going to select spin, and we're going to try, let's try 5. 6? Okay, we'll try 6. And I always leave the quality on best. It takes a little longer to process, but okay. So we've got our wheel. Let's turn off these other layers. Okay. Pretty decent motion blur. I think that may be a little too much for the spokes. Let's go back to, let's try 5. I'm afraid we just won't be able to see the spokes. Okay, a little bit better. Okay, so now we have our wheel, and the next part is going to be conditioning the bike and taking away all the parts that we don't want. Okay, so now that we've created the wheel, let's go back and unhide all of our previous layers and get the cropping back to where it needs to be. So we're going to go to the crop tool, and we're just going to select the original canvas. I'll just go, yeah. And again, we're going to use the transparent default crop, so it's not going to try to fill it in with AI stuff. Okay. Oh, you can see that our wheel, since I left it as a smart object, it applied the radial blur to the center using the center of the canvas, so that's why the wheel looks so odd. So let's go back, and before we recrop it, we're going to rasterize our newly created wheel. Okay, since we're done with that, we can delete these other layers that we used to construct the wheel. But I'll leave them in for now, just in case we may want to revisit it. Okay, back to the crop. Okay, now you can see our new wheel is in place, but now we have to go and erase all the parts that we don't want. So let's turn off the wheel for now, and we'll go work on the triathlete. So you remember we cut him out and pasted it over the background. So now let's just start using the selection tool here, and we're going to go through and let's cut out the front wheel here. And I could just use the erase tool. Actually, I may end up doing that because let's just do that. Let's go to the erase tool, and we'll work on the layer where the triathlete is. And I'm just simply going to go, let's erase the parts that we don't want. And as we get close here to the rest of the bike, I am going to make a selection just so that we don't get too carried away. Well, let's see, how close can I get? Yeah, so there we go. Now I'll go back to the erase tool. I don't have to worry about the edges. Okay, so there's that. And then we're going to erase the back wheel. And so in this case, I'm going to use the pen tool, and we're going to start up here, and I want a little bit more of a curved selection. Around the frame of the bike, because we're going to have to build back this part of the frame. And again, we'll go to the erase tool, and we're just going to erase within the selection. Okay. And then since it's a unicycle, it won't need the cranks here. And so that we get a nice clean selection around the bottom of his shoe, I'll use the pen tool here. All right. Oh, and let's clean this up too. Go back to the erase tool. Got a little work to do up here too. Yeah, let's just take care of this while we're over here. A little bit of the chain and sprocket, we're not going to need that. All right. There, we've saved a lot of weight already on this bike by turning it into a unicycle frame. Okay. Now, let's go to this part of the frame, and we're going to have Adobe's AI generative fill in the frame for us. Fill in the down tube. We'll see if the generative fill knows what a down tube is. Okay, so here this looks pretty interesting. So we'll see what it did. So it kind of figured out that part of his shoe was missing. Although I don't think it did a great job here. Let's see what the other ones are now. I don't like that. Now I do like this as part of the frame, the way that this... so we'll keep that. And I kind of like the bottom part as well. Not crazy about his shoe though. And then another piece here. Let's get rid of that. Again, I could use clone stamp or something on this, something so small, but okay. And then there's a few things up here we'll need to fix. Let's see if we can get a better representation of his shoe. I think that's going to be blocked by the wheel, but we'll see what it does. Okay, that just gets rid of it altogether. I think that's fine. Okay, now let's work on this front piece here. And fill in frame. No. 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 Let me just do it without a prompt and see what it comes up with. That's better. That's even better. That looks okay. I'm going to leave it. There's this one part here that I'm not crazy about. Okay, that's much better. Then we're not going to have any brake cables, so let's remove the brake cables. With a unicycle, the wheel fixed to the crank, there are no cables. There are no brakes. There, I like that. And if there are no brakes, there are no brake handles, but I'm going to leave the brake handles for now. I got some small cables and things here. I'm going to leave all those. But I think we've got a pretty good looking unicycle frame now. On the next part, we'll add back in the wheel. All right, so in this section, we are going to place the wheel and fit the wheel to the triathlete. So we'll re-enable the wheel layer, and we'll just, let's go back up to the wheel layer, and we're going to put the wheel about where we think it will sit, about where it makes sense. So I'm just having to guess here where that crank, the center of the crank is. So maybe somewhere about like that. What's going on with this black thing here? I might have to fix that. Let's go ahead and fix this thing. So I'm just going to create a layer under the triathlete, and we're going to clone stamp out this I think that's just an artifact from when we did some of that fill. Put that in. Okay. So I think that wheel looks pretty good right about there. And now we have to decide. I think the wheel would go in between his the frame of the bicycle or the unicycle and his far leg there. So we're going to add a mask and take the brush, and we'll just start masking out where the wheel doesn't belong. course, we'll need to mask out the spokes. And went too far here. So I'm going to change my brush to white and paint on the mask and bring that wheel back. All right. And then remove it from in front of this part of the frame. And you can see why I wasn't too worried about the heel of his shoe, because I think the wheel is going to block that. Okay. All right, now we'll bring the wheel back to full opacity. And now it looks like the wheel is just on the other side of the frame and his hydration system, but on this side of his far leg. All right. So that looks pretty good. But the other thing we need to do to make this look a little more realistic is add back in this shadow. So what I'm going to do is go grab the shadow and I'll go ahead and collect a little part of the wheel as well. So I'll know where to position the shadow. So we'll copy that and paste it to a new layer. We'll call this the shadow layer. And now we're going to place the shadow. So I'm going to line up the bottom of the wheel as best I can. About like that. And then I'm going to take a soft brush and reduce the flow. I'm just going to kind of feather the edges to maybe about 9 or 10% and just blend that shadow in a little bit better. There we go. This is much easier than trying to create a shadow from scratch. Okay. So I think this looks quite good for a triathlete on a unicycle. And I'm going to add one more thing. I'm going to replace the sky. So the sky here is pretty uniform and works great for doing some of this compositing work. But now let's add in a sky that's a little more interesting. I've got another one picked out. This looks like it has about the same lighting conditions. And so we're just going to move it over into our image. All right. And I'm going to drop the opacity some, and then we're going to line up the horizons. About like that. This just adds a little more interest to the image. And I'm going to group that layer. We'll call it the sky layer. And let's go ahead and don't really need to do this, but just for organizational, group the shadow layer with itself. Don't need this layer anymore. And then sometimes I like to add a curves layer. We're going to clip that to the sky just so if we need to make any adjustments to the layer. Let me straighten out the horizon. There we go. And before I get too far with the sky, I'm going to just stamp visible. So this is going to be Shift Option Command E on a new layer. And this is just going to capture all the changes that we've made thus far. And I'll explain why we're doing that at this point. But with the sky, we're going to double click on the sky layer. This is going to bring open the layer style dialog. And I'm going to go to the blend if panel, and we're going to move this slider for the underlying layer. So anything that's darker, I want to make that visible. And what I'm trying to do here is blend in the horizon. I'm not too worried about blending him because we're going to take care of that, but I want that horizon transition from the ocean to the horizon to look pretty good. Okay. And let's make a few adjustments to the sky, maybe add the contrast some. Okay, and on the sky layer, we're going to add a mask. And I'm going to go here to the rectangular marquee tool. I want to just make sure I mask out everything that is below the horizon. So obviously none of the sky layers should be coming in the horizon. So you can kind of see where it shows up in some of these lighter spots. And I want to mask that out. So and then I'm just going to add a little bit of a gradient. On the mask just to blend that horizon line a little bit better. Okay, and then let's go back the other way, change to a white brush, and we're going to do the gradient on the mask again. Okay. Then you can also see where the sky is coming through on him, especially in the lighter areas. And so the way that we're going to fix that is we'll turn off the sky for now. And then we're going to make a selection of our modified triathlete with the unicycle. So we'll select W for the selection tool. And then go up here where it says select subject, go to the cloud. And then from there, we'll turn the sky back on. And I'm going to create a mask, but I'm going to hold down the Option key so that it's black and we mask out the triathlete from the sky. And there may be a few spots here we need to clean it up. So I'm going to go back with my white brush. And we'll bring the flow back up to 100%. And we're just going to paint the sky back in where it needs to be. And let's do maybe 50% flow on the brush. Okay. And now I'm just going to go around the edge and inspect everything and make sure that all the masking looks good. Don't want any of this fringiness. Okay. And usually the areas where there are problems are areas where there's a lot of detail. But it looks like we've covered everything. Okay. So now it looks like we've got a triathlete on a unicycle. All right, thanks everybody for watching. I'm going to go and post this to my Instagram now.